Hello, and welcome to episode 53 of the West Aurora 129 podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Smith, Superintendent of West Aurora School District 129. Today, we're focusing on a question that sits at the heart of our strategic framework. What does it really mean to support every learner? I'm joined by Kelly Cook, our Assistant Director of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, commonly known as MTSS, and Carlos Guillen, our Community Agency and Restorative Practices Coordinator. Together, we'll unpack how MTSS and restorative practices work hand in hand to strengthen instruction, build relationships, and ensure that every student, academically, socially, and emotionally, has what they need to succeed. Our goal today is to give you a clearer look at the systems that help us serve all of our students all the time. But before we dive into the substance of today's conversation, I always like to help our listeners get to know the people behind the work. So Kelly and Carlos, I'd love to hear what drew you to this work of supporting students beyond just academics. Carlos, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of what led me to wanting to support students just beyond academics is my experience in the school setting, specifically here in District 129. I moved here third grade from the east side of Aurora here as a bilingual student. And it was just it was an experience that helped me understand the difficulties that students have outside of just academics. Trying to understand language that might not be their first language. Also just some of the barriers that students might have that I went through as far as just identity. Trying to figure out who am I in this world. And then naturally through just my career working at psychiatric treatment facilities. I worked for the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice, and then also did a little bit of work for West 40 and did some support with student and family advocacy over there. And that kind of just guided me to wanting to come back to my community and give back to it.
That's awesome.
And wanting to do things to really enhance the learning environment for our students and to really help build our students up for success as they leave our doors.
And what an example that it's not just a student sitting in a desk learning reading and writing and math. To your point, there's language, which can impact how well a student is incorporated by their peers. All of those things go into our efforts to successfully support our students. No, that's good. And I appreciate that you're telling a story that you know well yourself, having been a former student. So when you say my home, this really means something to you. I love that. Kelly, how about you?
So as a classroom teacher, I very quickly learned that learning isn't just about content. So it was whether students feel safe, confident, and supported. So I noticed that some of my biggest academic gains is when my students felt comfortable. We made connections within the classroom. So I knew it was important to focus on the relationships and the belonging piece within students. So that perspective stayed with me throughout my teaching. And now in my district role, I get to build systems that help every classroom, not just one. And as a parent in the district, it's personal. So I want every child, including my own, to feel valued and capable every single day.
And I think what I hear you, especially with that last statement, if you're going to support something, it's something that you believe in because you know your own children could be exposed to that resource. And to your point, if I want the best for my own children, that translates into what you want for all of the students in West Aurora. So I appreciate that level of commitment to what it is that you do and what you bring to the table as well. We typically do this at the end, but we're going to flip the script a little bit. And we're going to do a little rapid fire. We're going to move a little bit away from academics and just have some fun. So just real quick, if you could tell me, salty or sweet, Kelly?
Salty.
Ooh. Carlos, early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Early bird. All right. A man after my own heart right there. How about this one for each of you? Kelly, I'll jump back to you. One word that describes your approach to working with students or colleagues.
Listening to understand.
That's
words.
More than one word. If there was a buzzer, I'd be pushing it right now. All right.
Listening then.
Listening. All right. And Carlos, what's one word you think?
Collaborative.
Collaborative. Oh, that's good. Now let's shift into the bigger question that frames us today. And like I said, what it really means to support learners in West Aurora, District 129. MTSS, when people hear that, it's not a program. It's how we operate. So when you hear that, what can you say to underscore that statement in terms of what that means day to day? It's not a program. It's not, let's do MTSS. It's how we operate. So how does that live in your respective worlds?
So when I think about MTSS, it's not something extra that we do. It's how we make decisions about instruction, behavior, and social emotional supports every day. So it's not just a program that we provide for struggling students. It's how we do school, how we ensure every learner, from those who need enrichment to those who need intensive support, receive what they need to be successful.
Okay. Carlos, what do you think?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off what Kelly is saying, Restorative Practices isn't just a program. It's definitely a system. It's the way that we look at the whole student and identify what supports do they need to be a successful student. What is it that the student needs from academics to SEL to be an effective learner.
Now, hearing both of you, it makes me think of when I go home and I'm supporting my daughters, depending on the experience they had that day, I may have to show up differently, even though my role as father hasn't changed, their role as daughter hasn't changed, but how I show up might change. And I think that underscores a little bit of what you're saying in terms of identifying where students are and then meeting them there, and not just saying one size fits all, for lack of a better way to say it. Is that fair? Not easy to do by any means. And if we could dig into that a little bit, what does that shift or accommodation look like? How do we find or identify where a student is?
It goes with a lot of collaboration. So collaborating between all the stakeholders within our buildings and outside of our buildings. So parents, whoever is in contact with that child. So really meeting that student where they are is just having those conversations, those check-ins with students daily as to see how are they coming in the door. So one of the big things we did this year is we really rolled in our social emotional learning and behavior under our MTSS umbrella. And that really helped us focus more on the whole child. Because sometimes we do need to meet students where they are behaviorally or with their social emotional state at that point. And it isn't academics at that time. So even as a parent, if you have to adjust your approach with a child, it could be a bad day and it doesn't have anything to do with the academics. It's more the social emotional part that you're addressing. So I really think it is taking time to build those connections with students and really understanding where they come from, who they are in school, who they are outside of school.
That's good. That's good. Carlos, you're going to piggyback off of that?
I couldn't agree more with what Kelly's saying. It definitely is a collaboration with everyone that sees a student in a different perspective, and then identifying what is it that the student needs and when is it that they do need it. And I think it's so important that the collaboration happens during the MTSS process, where everyone does get to sit in the table, parents included, at sometimes, and even sometimes even community agencies as well that are supporting that family, are supporting that student, and all of us collaboratively thinking, what do we need to do to best support the student?
And the reason why I leaned in on that, or I wanted you to speak to it a little bit more, is both of you represent different perspectives. Kelly coming from more academic, Carlos from the social emotional. But I heard both of you say that's where the collaboration has to happen. And that speaks to, we can't just do that by chance. There has to be a system that builds or pulls those two things together. And that's what we're working to refine within 129 is what is the system that marries those two things together in line with what the classroom teacher is doing day to day. And that takes us to my next question, the classroom teacher day to day. I mean, we talk about MTSS, we talk about multi-tiered systems of support, but really a system of support can only build off of that frontline instruction. So can you talk about why it is so important for us to really hone in on that frontline teacher instruction day to day within the classroom before we get to layers of intervention?
Yeah, so strong tier 1 instruction is really the heart of MTSS. So it's the foundation of all of our learning, and it's the opportunity to reach all of our students. So all students receive a strong tier 1 instruction. That is something that we pride ourselves on, that we make sure that students are not pulled out for that core instruction. So any additional support they receive is on top of, not in replace of.
Well, and I want to pause you right there because there might be some in our audience who remember a day where student was here and then they were pulled and we didn't see them for hours on end. That's not what we're looking to do.
No.
if I'm understanding what you're talking about.
100%.
It's layering support within the classroom so students, as much as possible, are together with one another. Is that fair to say?
That is fair.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to really hit that point home. So go ahead.
No, so I think it is. It's the stronger your tier 1 is, the fewer students you're going to find that need that additional support or intervention. So we really want to make sure that the majority of the classroom is receiving, and the majority of the classroom is able to understand the material without additional interventions. When we're really looking and reflecting at the instruction that's happening, if we are noticing that the majority of our class is struggling, we need to really look at the delivery of the instruction and whether or not we maybe need to deliver that in a different way for a better understanding of the students.
So if I could put a picture to that, I may deliver a lesson that a majority of the class doesn't understand. I may tweak it, and I'm just using it as an example. I may bring in more of a hands-on experience. And just that adjustment is an accommodation that gives an on-ramp to more students, but it's also going to grab the quote unquote average to above average, as well as those that needed that hands-on experience, versus continuing to plow forward and say, if you need more, you need to go somewhere else. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. Sometimes it's just restating a question a different way.
There you go.
And to help with the understanding or building some of that background knowledge prior to that lesson, that some students come in with a different sense of background and they don't have the same experiences. So really building that up.
Knowledge and vocabulary is key to what you started with, Carlos, in terms of that's part of language development and understanding. Words mean different things, and someone who is it no or no? You heard me say the same thing, but those could be two different words in our language, right? Yeah. Whether you know something or are you telling me no, don't do something. So that's an example. But where I'm pivoting to you is within that same classroom are potentially 25 personalities. And that's where your expertise comes to the table in terms of supporting how are those 25 personalities blending together. So can you just talk a little bit about how you support the teacher in that tier 1 frontline instruction as they're figuring out how to blend those personalities together?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where restorative practices kind of shines of ensuring that we are building a community within our classrooms, within our schools, and ensuring that every single student is actively engaged in building that community so that they feel that that is their community. It's not just a community. Part of the restorative framework is ensuring that we're doing proactive things and building that community in that tier 1 is definitely that proactive piece that we're looking for when wanting to support 25 different personalities in a classroom or even 100 of different personalities within a building. So that is definitely where kind of that shines. And then as far as the SEL component to this, ensuring that we are creating common language and consistency across the board so that students here, maybe the expectation is that we are respectful, but everyone has the same understanding of what is respectful in our classroom, what is respectful in our school, what is respectful in our district.
And before we move into the tiered support, I want to make sure we talk about a new acronym that some of our community may be hearing or have learned that students are using. And that acronym is SRTT. Kelly, can you talk to us about what SRTT means? And I'm bringing this up intentionally because that still lives within that frontline tier 1 instruction. Is that correct?
That is correct. Okay. So SRTT is structured responsive teaching time. So that is support to students during the school day, and it's responsive to the needs of the student. So it is very fluid based on whether it's academic or social emotional, and it encompasses tier 1 support, whether that can be enrichment or just maybe differentiating a lesson or reteaching. It encompasses the tier 2 for those students that might just need a little more support, and then some tier 3 instruction if they need more intensive support based on a skill. So that is in elementary school, that's 5 days a week built into the student schedule. And in middle school, that is 2 days a week built into their schedule.
Very good. And again, I want to reiterate that is still a fluid process or a time that happens within the child's school day.
Yes.
I know I said it earlier, but I want to revisit. This is not send them away for hours. This is incorporated within the day, and it's structured supports based on, as you said, what the child may need. That could be enrichment. That could be remediation. That could be just a revisiting of content. That's why I appreciate that time, because the teacher then can know their students that much more and where they are. all part of a process. So Carlos, I'm going to pivot back to you because we introduced restorative practice coaches a couple years ago, and we tried it in a few buildings on a small scale, but we've really grown our team that you oversee. Can you talk to us about our restorative practice coaches and their role in our system?
Yeah, absolutely. Restorative practices really is a proactive relationship building structure. It's not just discipline. Restorative conversations definitely help protect that instructional time. And it helps us build that community of belonging and safety that then impacts directly academic growth.
Oh, that's good.
Restorative coaches partner with teachers to strengthen classroom climate and to build consistency, which then builds psychological safety with our students so that we can then challenge them academically and also help them understand choices and maybe even learn how to make better choices when they make those mistakes.
So it's within that partnership of the coach and the teacher that we're able to see those very things that you just talked about.
Absolutely. In restorative practices, we have a rule called an 80-20 rule. 80% of what we do in restorative practices should be proactive. 20% should be reactive or should be responsive. So essentially, restorative practice coaches are building that community so that when something happens to harm that community or that affects that community, we're able to effectively then repair that community. It goes back to kind of that saying that we can't fix something that hasn't been built. So essentially the restorative practice coaches in their buildings are building up those communities and building up that connection so that people feel psychologically safe in their classrooms and in their environments.
And thankfully we have them, I believe, embedded in every school at this point and a couple at the high school.
Yes, we have them in all of our elementary buildings, middle school buildings, and high school, and at Blackhawk Academy. We don't have them at the ELA or at Hopewell at the moment.
Sure. But definitely permeated throughout our system.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I want to lean in on that a little bit more. And something that you said about being proactive versus reactive. Our schools and our knowledge of supporting students has grown in that we are not just waiting for someone or a student to make a poor decision or to act out, and then we come with a punitive response. That's not restoring them, to your point. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes students don't make good choices, and we do have a system to address that via consequence. But more than anything, I think what I heard you say is a student may make a decision, and I look at Johnny and say, Johnny, that's not what I know of you, which tells me there's something going on. Can we pause and ask, how can I help you? Before I just respond to that behavior. I'm not excusing it. I want everyone listening to us to understand you didn't hear me say anything about excusing, but at the same time, that behavior is a product of something else potentially that's going on, that if we don't address it, we're just going to be right back here the next day potentially. Or if we're talking to Johnny and something's happening and there's a trigger and I say, okay, what do I notice? And he says, well, you said I have homework. All right. And when I get home, I have to take care of my brothers and sisters and do some other chores, and I may not have time. And I got upset because I got anxious about not wanting to disappoint you with what you were telling me to do. Thank you for letting me know. Now I know how to meet you where you are as your teacher and support you so you can still be successful and meet the expectations of home while balancing school. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think we also really focus on when Johnny does maybe act out, that it doesn't define him, that Johnny, you made a bad choice. You made a poor choice. That doesn't define who you are.
It's good.
So that is something I think that we do work on, because oftentimes they internalize that behavior and
I'm the bad kid. No, you made a choice, but that doesn't define who you are.
Yeah.
Who you are, to your point, is a valued member of our community. When I say you, I mean Carlos. That was the point you were making. People listening to us can't tell that I was just pointing at you just now. Let's move to another area of support. And Carlos, Kelly, either one can jump in. With speaking of our multilingual learners and our students with IEPs, can you talk more about how underscoring our systems of support applies to them as well? Even if identified as, yes, I'm learning the language, or I have an IEP, which says there is a way that I need to approach learning that's a little different, but all of that can still be incorporated within our system. Is that what I've heard you guys saying? Kelly, you want to take that one?
Sure, 100%. So we really view multilingualism as an asset. So really building from the student's strengths. And it's important that we celebrate and honor that native language. With students with IEPs, or are first and foremost, they're general education students. So all of our students are general education students, and everyone should have the same access to standards and the support that they need. So students within the classroom with individualized education plans or IEPs, they, as teachers, we need to find ways for them to access the instruction within the classroom so that they're successful as well. So it's not necessarily a different instruction or they have different standards. It's they have access to the same standards that all students have, and they just get the additional support to kind of help them access it.
And similarly, students come with emotions and can become dysregulated. And that's in your wheelhouse, Carlos. So you're able to speak to supporting students in that regard as well.
One of the skills that we work on in SEL is regulation, how to regulate ourselves whenever we might be having some sort of hard time dealing with whatever situation is there. And that is definitely something that we do collaboratively with the MTSS team, with the teachers, with the staff members, with the students, so that we are able to kind of provide that support for all of our students.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And if I, again, relating to my own role as a father, there are times where I have to remind myself as I'm working with my daughters that in school is where they're learning the skills. At home is where they're learning the skills. And when they make a poor choice or they become dysregulated, that's because they're still learning. And part of our roles is to come alongside them in that process. So I can appreciate what it is that you're doing. And I brought that up on purpose. And I mentioned home because there's work that happens behind the scenes. I know as when I was a fifth grade teacher, part of my classes were classroom management, but I didn't talk about student emotional supports. I didn't go and get a degree in social work. Can you talk about, both of you, the efforts and energy that you put in behind the scenes to help staff prepare for responding to students?
Yeah, I think just a lot of conversations we've had this year, really digging into and putting social emotional learning under that MTSS umbrella, is sometimes what students need most is that SEL piece. So although they might be struggling in math or reading, it's hard to get to the math or reading when they are dysregulated or they are having a difficult time within school. So really working with RPCs to then help teachers really build those connections in the classroom and understanding where students are. Children all respond differently to different situations. So really just making sure that how we are responding is appropriate for that individual student. And really, I think that has been the benefit of that SRTT time is it is responsive and it is in the moment. So we are able to look at what a student needs. When do we make that shift of moving on to something else? And do we need to pause where we are and look at a different approach based on what we are seeing? So we do have opportunities within our day for PLCs where teachers can meet and kind of have conversations as to what is going on within their classroom, or when they're meeting to group students for that SRTT time, really looking across the grade level, who can support that student and what support is needed. And then our problem solving meetings that we have monthly to just really bring up and talk through what are you noticing, the stakeholders are at the table, and how can we really support within the school day for those students. So,
and not to call you out, Carlos, but I know I've had the pleasure and opportunity to literally walk into a meeting where you are engaged in a restorative circle with adults.
yes.
As a way for them to practice. Can you talk about what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of department collaboration within the district, from social workers to psychs, to deans, to assistant principals, to even transportation and recess and lunch supervisors as well. Understanding that restorative practices is part of the foundation of how we interact with our students and what we do to support our students, and helping everyone kind of just understand what that looks like in their role in supporting our buildings and our students.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's just important that the shift of decisions aren't made in isolation. So really looking at, we all share students from the moment they get on that bus in the morning to till they're here, until they go home. So really that student belongs to every single person within our district. So
100%. And it reminds me, when I was speaking with our staff, you talked about all of the different groups, Carlos, that you support. And I remember speaking to our bus drivers and saying, you have the opportunity to set up a child's day or literally save it based on your interactions with them. So the comprehensive nature, Kelly, that you just underscored of the fact that they're all of our students. And each one of us has an opportunity to make a deposit in a child's life that could really sprout into something special and help with their sense of belonging as they look to help each other as well. Because I know we work to help students collaborate and connect with one another, not just with adults, but there's a lot that goes into building a community, right?
Absolutely. And everyone has a hand at building that community. And not only that, but every student connects with adults differently. So that just everyone having that opportunity to collaborate and connect with the student provides an opportunity for that student to feel safe, feel engaged.
And we've talked about our roles within our system, but part of our responsibility is also to make connections beyond West Aurora with our community, with families, and extend those lines of support all the way into the home. So can you all, both of you or either one, talk about the partnerships that we've been able to develop in our community and how you look to arm parents with skills that they can then reinforce at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what we've been doing to support parents is hosting monthly parent cafes, where we have discussions on the 5 protective factors of families. And also just having an opportunity to connect families with other families and other parents that are curious in learning more on how to connect and support their kids at home. We've also had a little bit of collaboration partnership with parents from an organization by the name of Kofi, who requested training themselves in restorative practices. And they were very excited to receive that training after school for about a week and learning how those processes and how restorative practices could look like at home when setting expectations, when communicating with their students, when setting expectations and boundaries with their students, and just overall, I guess, how that lives in their world at home.
Good.
And I think just opportunities that parents have to get into the schools and talk to the teachers and just see the building. So attending conferences, really just asking questions. If there's something that you're not understanding with what is going on within the classroom, ask that question. Ask what data is being used to measure growth. Really focus on growth and not just a score. So oftentimes we get a score that says, oh, my student fell behind, but what does the growth look? So when you get that report, really look at the growth that student's making. And then I think just looking at questions that you ask when students get home. So instead of the, how was your day? Keeping it general and you get the good, really just asking, was there something that challenged you today? Like, what are you learning that maybe is difficult for you or that you're really trying to improve on? And then most importantly, I think just as a parent, sometimes it's hard to hear that your child needs extra support. So I think really just taking in that if your child receives extra support, it means we're paying attention. That doesn't mean something is wrong. So I think really honing in on we're here to help when we notice something.
Oh, that's good.
So
that's good. And if I can model the idea of being okay with needing extra support, there's no way that I would be able to be successful without the extra support that I'm receiving. So normalizing that you don't have to do it all yourself, and it's okay to take advantage of the resources or others in order for you to grow as well. I like that you underscored that specifically. Carlos, you said something interesting. You said something about the five factors. I'm sure I'm not giving the name right, but in case a parent or one of our community members would like to look something up, can you share what the real name is and what those 5 things are?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 5 protective factors for strengthening families is resilience, social connection, knowledge of parenting and child development, social and emotional competence of children, and concrete supports.
So as you work with families, you go through each one and have reflective questions so they know what it looks like to engage?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have collaborative conversations regarding these protective factors and how that relates to their family and connecting it to even what that experience looks like to all of us as parents.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. And as we look to wrap up here with this final question, Carlos, you mentioned something about being preventative in our actions. And there was another statement, moving away from waiting to fail. Can you talk about how that sets a student up so much as opposed to waiting to fail, but actually stepping in and pre-mediating as opposed to remediating, and how that can go a long way for how a student attends to being a successful student.
Absolutely. We definitely want to move away from this wait to fail mentality to this early identification and to provide proactive support. That prevention definitely protects that learning time and strengthens our culture and builds confidence for our students.
Good.
It allows us to prepare students, not just for the next grade, but for graduation and for beyond as well. Either way, we're going to spend the time with a student who's struggling. We can spend the time reacting, or we can spend the time proactively.
There it is.
Helping build those supports.
Either way, time is going to be invested. It's about how we can be intentional about how we invest the time. Because quite honestly, to your point, pre-mediation, although people may not understand it, can actually be less time than the remediation side of things and trying to restore or bring someone back who is dysregulated. That's good. Kelly, from your lens, how would you speak to or add on to what Carlos shared about being as opposed to being reactive, but being preventative?
I think just from setting expectations as to what we expect and how things look within different parts of our building. But really, most importantly, a lot of the work that we've been doing is really building the confidence in students to regulate their emotions and to understand their feelings. So I think really just building the confidence early in students so that they can manage their emotions and manage their frustrations and not waiting for it to blow up. So really just teaching those skills along the way to self-regulate that allow them to be present in the classroom and access the information and the instruction that.
And to your point, our job as educators is to consistently present information to students that is something in a way that challenges their thinking. That's the whole role of education, is to teach, which means you're going to come up against something you did not know. And that in and of itself, being exposed to something you don't know, and you think about adults who are presented with the unknown and how sometimes we respond. Okay, shrink that down to a little person, and they're trying to experience that throughout the school day while at the same time engaging other students who are doing the very same thing. So by nature, teaching the skills in how to be excited, which is something we talk about with having joy, to being curious about learning, knowing that it's going to be complex, but yet the effort and energy that they're putting in now is only going to build on one another.
Change is hard, right?
Yes,
like change is hard, and even little people have feelings. So
that's right.
They just
That's good. That's so good. Kelly and Carlos, as we wrap up, I want to thank you both for your leadership and the clarity that you bring to this work every day. Supporting every learner is not just a phrase. It's a daily commitment that requires structure, collaboration, and heart. Kelly, your work in building coherent systems across pre-K 12 ensures that our supports are aligned and proactive. And Carlos, your leadership in restorative practices strengthens the relationships and culture that make learning possible. Man, both of you, I am so grateful for the impact that you both have had on our system as a school district and our students and staff across the district. Thank you for joining me today. I have really appreciated you giving up of your time.
Thank you. I was happy to be here.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope this conversation gave you a deeper understanding of what it truly means to support every learner in School District 129. Don't forget, you can follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.